Hello, Dr. Kalman Andrassy here again, and I'd like to discuss two things in one with this lecture. The first being content analysis and the general notion of using available data, and the second case study research, which kind of encompasses a broad spectrum of different things. Okay, so let's start with the notion of content analysis. Which is sort of unique in the sense that it is a strong contender uh, to be useful both in quantitative and in qualitative research and analysis as well. So basically, the idea behind content analysis is that it is the systematic analysis and interpretation of types of communication and communication artifacts. Now, traditionally, when we're talking about that, we mean texts, like something that is written down, but it can include a number of different types of communication, including oral communication, visual content, and things like that. So, books, newspaper articles, television programs, speeches, cinematic films, advertisements, song lyrics, as I love to do in my in-person classes. I like to play songs and try to have the students try to derive the meaning of those songs. And more recently, things like social media postings and things all fall under the category of content analysis, which also coincidentally falls under the category of unobtrusive methods, which make use of available data. Okay, so to kind of encompass all the different things that unobtrusive methods and available data works with or consists of. I'm talking about things like existing statistics, secondary data, previously obtained primary data, anything like that falls under this broad category of unobtrusive available data methods. Okay, so a big part about content analysis is to analyze the way in which the message is being delivered from the individual who is communicating the message to the person that is receiving the message and interpreting that message. So it's all about, what kind of communication is ultimately being sent, to whom does the communication try to get to. Ultimately, what is the purpose of the communication? How is it communicated, and to what effect, right? How much of an impact does that communication actually have on the recipient? So, if you're looking at books, for example, you can look at it from any number of different facets. You can look at individual chapters within the book. You can look at, maybe pictures or photographs within the book, or limit things to specific phrases or sentences. Sometimes even individual words and the word choice that individuals use to discuss things. Those are kind of the units of analysis. As a researcher, you have to kind of think about how are you going to interpret and categorize and try to find deeper meaning behind the communication based on kind of the level at which you're making the examination of the topic. Okay. Another important content or rather a concept in content analysis is hermeneutics, which is essentially looking at text to try to find the underlying meaning behind it and to kind of take a holistic approach to understanding the text. So something that, if you're looking at a book, for example, something that is mentioned on page 1 of the book, how it kind of applies to page 100 of the book. And that kind of content analysis actually stems from interpretation of various religious texts and ancient texts, where you're trying to understand the text comprehensively under the premise that you can't truly understand any individual part without factoring in the entire system. So very notably, the Catholic Church set up a number of academic institutions and a lot of it was to hermeneutically study the various books of the Bible and things like that in order to try to come to a as general a description of what's going on in the Bible as possible, as well as a narrowed and specific focus and interpretation of the various chapters and sections of the Bible as well. So, I mean, content analysis in general is a very, useful tool for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, it's pretty inexpensive to be able to gather content analysis data, as long as you can, make yourself get yourself over to a library and look at a series of books on a particular topic, or if you can get your hands on the other types of various communications that are available out there, you can. You're not going to have too much trouble actually gathering all that information together and being able to analyze the content. It's also nice that, just like with interview methods and ethnographic research and things like that, content can be coded and compared and contrasted, and you can find themes and trends and things like that that lend yourself to kind of understanding the communications better, and being able to organize things in a logical sort of fashion. Okay. Again, it's an unobtrusive type of method, so it minimizes the likelihood that the study's conditions are likely to harm an individual. Also, it basically, you're not going to run into very many ethical problems traditionally in doing a content analysis. Now, there are, of course, new ethical questions that kind of become raised in doing content analysis. For example, if you're looking at somebody's social media posts or something like that, and they say something that could potentially be harmful to their reputation, and if you're reporting about it, that suddenly gets a larger audience than it otherwise would have, do you use that content or not? These are kinds of things that you have to think about in doing content analysis, but as far as, worrying about the risk of harm, it's virtually zero, at least as far as the physical and even the emotional and psychological harms that can come about, except in the circumstances that I just kind of mentioned, where, somebody's saying something that maybe they didn't really mean, or that is misinterpreted, and it comes to sort of problematic ends in analyzing it for a broader audience, right? The problem with content analysis is that it has its disadvantages. You have to use recorded communications, right? You can't get the information about a communication without it being somehow recorded, whether it be on film or on paper or in an image format, right? So as such, there are some concerns about the validity of content analysis because, of course, there are biases that might be in place that the original author may have considered or not considered. And of course, the researcher himself or herself might limit the types of communications that are being sort of selected to be part of the broader expanse of work on the topic. So you have potential selection-related biases that go into that as well. Okay. So yeah, content analysis is fantastic. Some ideas or examples of content analysis that has been done in classes that I've been a part of. I had a student once that looked at textbooks from the 1970s to the present day, and how they dealt with the topic of LGBT and other sexual groups and things like that. And he looked at whether the group was mentioned at all in the textbook, and then of course the extent to which it was mentioned. Was it mentioned in passing in another section, perhaps a section on sexuality in general? Was there a dedicated chapter to the topic? Was there a full subsection under another topic? Examining the content from a lot of different facets and perspectives in order to kind of build an explanation of essentially how coverage of that particular topic evolved over the past 40 and 50 years. Okay. Now, available data in general, right? Using any type of information that's previously been collected. There's lots of different types that you'll read about in the course of reading about available data. Physical traces left by people, erosion measures, the way in which basically the physical environment has been affected by humans, accretion measures that look at human activity through deposits of earth and artifacts and things like that. You can find evidence of what people engage in, what they consume, and things like that. In garbage bins and as relics that are scattered about where they used to live if they are no longer physically present in that area. So it kind of lends itself to a lot of archaeological kind of techniques and things like that. If that's the sort of thing that you're trying to find information about. So available data itself is not without its own disadvantages. You got some reliability potential issues because the data isn't personally being measured by the researcher. You don't know if you're going to get the same data in a subsequent measurement, with another individual looking at the same information. Would they come to the same results? People may underreport data or specifically, seek out specific types of information to report that kind of glances over or ignores other important information that might have been in the data that was being used, but wasn't specifically singled out. So there's all sorts of things like that which don't make it the most perfect style of data collection tool out there, but nevertheless it can be very, very useful and very inexpensive to get the kinds of answers that you're looking for. Okay, which brings me to the notion of a case study. So you've got lots of different potential ways you can design a study. You've got cross-sectional designs where you're collecting all of your data in one period of time and only examining and analyzing that data once. You can do a longitudinal study where you are collecting data at multiple different points in time. And then you have the notion of the case study, which is almost like a combination of the two. I mean, technically, it's more of a cross-sectional kind of design because you're trying to do all your analysis at once. But the thing about a case study is that you're focusing on a single unit of analysis within its social context. Okay, so a case study is really holistic. It's a systematic analysis. You look at multiple different facets, multiple different perspectives of looking at one particular unit of analysis, and it's always within the overarching social context that you're kind of exploring that data. So you got intrinsic case studies, which are all about trying to look at many aspects of a case holistically. You can have an instrumental case study where you're trying to generalize about the nature of some sort of social phenomenon. You can do multiple case studies and kind of bring them together to kind of come to an understanding of what's going on. When you have multiple cases at the same time, it's called a quintain. But the idea is that you're really going in and you're trying to look at all sorts of different aspects about one unit of analysis. So that can be an individual. So in psychological research, there's a lot of case studies that look at individuals with certain types of psychological disorders and trying to lay out all of the symptoms and whatnot of those kinds of cases. In business, you're looking at oftentimes organizational analysis, so looking at how company A conducts its business, how its human resources work, how its finances work, how its rank and file members of the workforce do their job. Looking at all these different organizational facets and whatnot. So it's kind of neat in the sense that you can use a case study to do all sorts of different things, like advocate for causes. It can be a biographical kind of thing. You can use it for program evaluation, and you can use it simply for educational purposes and things like that. So it's really neat because you're able to collect a large amount of primarily qualitative data that kind of allows you to potentially posit solutions to problems using a number of different perspectives, essentially. So yeah, what's really neat about it is that the interpretation that's done in a case study, like I said, is always done in its social content. There's multiple disparate points of data, and you're always bringing it back to the specifics of how the interactions and whatever it is that you're looking at exist within the specific confines of the social construct or social setting that you're finding the data in. Okay, so it's a really neat kind of an approach, and you can kind of look at Napoleon Chagnon's work with the Yanomamo as a case study that really utilizes a mixed methods approach. So you can look up Napoleon Chagnon and his work with the Yanomamo tribe in the Amazon rainforest. And he did interviews with individuals. He did content analysis of looking at various artifacts of communication and things like that, and used that mixed method sort of an approach to build this case study on the way in which the Yanomamo essentially lead their lives. So, not only is that useful for more of the ethnographic research component of understanding research, but it's also very helpful in the sense that it does indeed lend itself to a very comprehensive and multifaceted look at a particular culture. So those are the last type of qualitative studies that I wanted to briefly mention and kind of hopefully give some ideas to those of you trying to collect data from maybe a non-interview kind of perspective, or apart from just doing ethnographic observations. And yeah, you can really create some really fantastic data and come to really interesting conclusions about social phenomena and the way the world works by approaching problems from either a content analysis or a case study, or even using just any type of available data as the basis of your analyses.